Okay, continuing with refueling considerations for a helicopter. At the end of the first part of this, I asked a trivia question and offered to give a free t-shirt to everybody that got the trivia question correct, and congratulations to our winners, by the way. The trivia question, or the question was, what two items are on the R-22 checklist, pre-flight checklist, that are not on the R-44 pre-flight checklist? And the correct answer is number one, the lower sheave bearing teletemp. It's present on the R-22 pre-flight checklist, and it's not on the R-44 pre-flight checklist because it basically doesn't have a lower bearing teletemp, lower sheave bearing teletemp. There's a place to put one, there's a flat spot. If it was actually there, you'd have to crawl way up under the helicopter to try to look at it, and for whatever reason, it doesn't have one. The second item that's on the R-22 pre-flight checklist that's not on the R-44 is the alternator belt tension. All right, it's on the pre-flight checklist for the R-22, but it's not on the R-44. Obviously, the R-44 has an alternator belt, but again, sort of like the sheave bearing, you'd have to crawl way up under the helicopter, and occasionally I do. You have to crawl up under the helicopter to get a good look at the alternator belt, make sure the belt's in good shape, the tension's correct, and that sort of thing. So congratulations to our winners, and actually a few people sent me some other few miscellaneous items that were on one but not on the other, and I applaud you for your catches on that. So if you guys are interested in another trivia question, I've got one for you, and this trivia question has to do with the R-44 Raven 1, and the question is the fuel pump on an R-44 Raven 1 mechanical or electric, and where is it located? If you think you know the answer to that question, send me an email at capecopters@yahoo.com. Be sure and include your mailing address, and anybody that can answer that one will get a free Cape Copters pin light, and I'll fire that off in the mail to you if you get the answer correct. Okay, continuing on refueling considerations for a helicopter. We talked about the R-44. Let's talk about the R-22. Okay, so also in the same time, we're going to discuss a little bit of weight and balance issues on the R-22. So, had a Beta 2, the empty weight was 887 pounds, and the max gross weight on the Beta 2 that we had, all Beta 2s actually, is 1,370 pounds. So that gives you a usable load of 483 pounds. Now, the allowable seat limit on an R-22 is 240 pounds per seat. Realistically, that's just not very practical. All right, if you get passengers on board the aircraft that weigh much more than about 200 pounds, you try to put 200 pounders in the aircraft. If they're not good friends at the beginning of the flight, they're going to be by the end of the flight, because there's just not much room in there at all. So practically, once you get up to about 200 pounds, that's really about it for an R-22. All right. So now, going back to our weight and balance, we've got 483 pounds of usable load. And let's say we were to do something like put two 200-pounders in there. Let's look at that. All right, how much fuel does an R-22 potentially hold? All right, well, R-22 that has bladder tanks in it, unfortunately when they went to the tanks that have bladder tanks in them have hold a total of about 3 gallons less than what they used to have before they didn't have bladder tanks. So if we look at the main tank on the left, an R-22 with bladder tanks, it holds 16.9 gallons of fuel. All right, how much does an R-22 burn? An R-22 burns right at 9 gallons per hour. And again, you're not going to find that in the POH, but it burns right at 9 gallons per hour. All right. So in the main tank, we've got 16.9 gallons. That's slightly less than 2 hours worth of fuel. And over on the aux tank, we have 9.4 gallons, which is right at 1 hour worth of fuel. All right. So if we did something stupid like put our two 200-pound fat Americans on board the aircraft, we only have about 83 pounds now left over that we can use for fuel. If you divide that by 6, that only gives you right at 14 gallons of fuel. All right, that's only right at an hour and a half worth of fuel. If you fly much more than that, you're going to fall out of the sky. All right, so you only get an hour and a half worth of fuel if you got two 200-pound fat Americans in there. So obviously you can see when you start packing people into that weigh a lot, you're really limited on the amount of fuel that you can take. How about we go down to two guys that weigh 160 pounds, or two guys or gals that weigh 160 pounds apiece? Well, two people that weigh 160 pounds, that's 320 pounds. That leaves you 163 pounds for fuel, and you can fill it completely up, both tanks topped off, and you're right at max gross weight. All right? Now, how about you're the only one in the aircraft, and you're Bad American 200 pounder, you're the only one in the aircraft? Then fill the damn thing all the way up, particularly if you're going on a cross-country flight. Fuel can be your friend. Sometimes if you had to be weather delays or deviations, having that extra 30 or 45 minutes worth of fuel sometimes is a godsend. So when in doubt, if the weight allows it, take about as much fuel as you possibly can. Okay? All right, what happens if we do something stupid, like we put two 200 pounders in a Beta 2 and we top it all the way up on fuel? Are we going to be over over max gross weight? Yeah, by about 80 pounds. All right, but we're down here in good old thick air in Missouri in the Midwest, and if we pull collective, will the aircraft actually lift off 80 pounds over gross in good old thick air down here in Missouri? Yes, it will, and that's kind of the problem. All right, if you exceed the recommended manifold pressure on there, you're repeatedly stressing the airframe. And if you did that over and over again, what we typically see is aircraft that's done to, that are frequently flown overweight and over torqued, that you run the risk of metal fatigue and cracking of the frame and that sort of thing. And so if we ever do a pre-buy inspection for an aircraft, a 22 or 44, either one, and we find cracking in the frame, I'm telling you, just say no. That's an aircraft that has been over-torqued and flown overweight repeatedly, and it's probably one that you just want to avoid.